A detailed medieval painting of a snowy night in 1215, a massive European stone castle standing under a dark winter sky. Snow-covered towers, warm candlelight glowing from narrow windows. A lone traveller wearing a wool cloak approaching the castle gate. Early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. Oil painting texture. Peaceful and cinematic mood. A medieval oil painting showing a quiet snowy countryside road in the year 1215. A traveller walking through fresh snow toward a distant stone castle. Bare trees covered with frost, winter moonlight, a horse carriage in the background, villagers wearing early 13th century medieval clothing, authentic high Middle Ages European setting, detailed historical painting style, a beautiful historical painting of a 1215 medieval castle entrance at night, large wooden gates opening, a castle guard wearing a thick wool cloak and holding a lantern welcoming a visitor. Snow falling around the stone walls. Torches is illuminating the gatehouse. Early 13th century European Middle Ages architecture. Realistic medieval art style. A warm medieval painting of a great hall inside a European castle in 1215 knights, servants, and noble families gathering around a large fireplace, people wearing wool tunics, linen dresses, and medieval cloaks, wooden tables with bread and roasted food, candlelight reflecting on stone walls, authentic high Middle Ages atmosphere, detailed oil painting, a peaceful bedtime scene painted in medieval style, a person sitting beside a crackling fireplace inside a 1215 castle hall. Hands warming near the flames, candles glowing softly, stone walls decorated with medieval banners, wooden furniture, early 13th century European castle interior, cozy historical painting with soft brush strokes, a realistic medieval painting of castle inhabitants preparing for a winter evening in 1215, servants carrying wooden dishes, cooks bringing roasted food, villagers repairing clothing near the fire, knights resting after the day. All wearing authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing. Candlelit stone hall, detailed Renaissance-style historical illustration, a cinematic oil painting of a medieval castle tower during a snowy winter night in 1215, small flames glowing behind narrow arrow windows, snow covering the stone walls, dark sky filled with falling snowflakes, early Gothic architecture, mysterious but peaceful high Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic historical artwork, a detailed medieval manuscript painting style scene of ordinary people living inside a castle, in 1215 families sitting near a fireplace, children listening to old stories, adults drinking from wooden cups, wool blankets and medieval clothing, warm candlelight, authentic daily life in the European Middle Ages, hand-painted historical illustration, a historical oil painting of a medieval knight resting beside a fireplace in a castle hall in 1215 wearing chainmail armour, partially covered by a wool cloak, sword placed nearby, snow visible through stone windows, early 13th century England atmosphere, realistic medieval painting style, a peaceful winter painting of a noble medieval woman inside a 1215 castle chamber, wearing an early 13th century long gown and veil, sitting near candles and a small fireplace, stone walls, wooden furniture, fur blankets, snow outside the window, authentic Middle Ages European interior, soft oil painting style, A medieval painting of a castle kitchen in the year 1215, cooks preparing bread and roasted meat over a large fireplace. Wooden shelves, iron cooking tools, servants wearing medieval clothing, warm firelight contrasting with snowy darkness outside. Highly detailed High Middle Ages historical artwork. A realistic historical painting of a medieval castle courtyard during a snowy evening in 1215, guards walking along stone walls. Horses standing near wooden stables. Villagers carrying firewood. Snow covering the ground. Torches lighting the courtyard. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. Oil painting style. A fantasy-inspired but historically accurate medieval painting of a 1215 castle great hall at night. A storyteller sitting beside a fireplace telling ancient tales. Knights and villagers listening quietly. Candles flickering. Wooden benches. Stone columns. Early Gothic medieval architecture. Peaceful bedtime atmosphere. Detailed painted artwork. A medieval oil painting showing the harsh winter reality of life in 1215, a castle guard standing outside in heavy snow wearing a thick wool cloak, holding a torch near the stone walls, frozen landscape, early 13th century European Middle Ages clothing and architecture, realistic historical painting. A cosy medieval painting of a small castle room in 1215, a wooden bed covered with wool blankets. Candle holders. Stone fireplace glowing warmly. A person preparing for sleep wearing medieval night clothing. Snowstorm visible outside. Authentic early 13th century European castle life. Soft, painterly style. A detailed historical painting of medieval villagers inside a castle during a snowy night in 1215, people sitting around a fire sharing stories. Wooden cups, simple medieval clothing, elderly people, children, and workers together, showing the castle as a living community of the High Middle Ages. Realistic oil painting. A dramatic medieval painting of the Magna Carta era in 1215 England. A stone castle hall with nobles and knights discussing important matters near a fireplace. Parchment documents on a wooden table. Early 13th century clothing. Candles illuminating the room. Authentic historical Middle Ages artwork. A peaceful landscape painting of a 1215 medieval castle, surrounded by snow-covered fields and forests, smoke rising from chimneys, warm lights glowing from windows, villagers walking through snowy paths, early 13th century European countryside, traditional oil painting with detailed brushwork, a close-up medieval painting of a traveller inside a 1215 castle warming hands near a fireplace, wearing a thick wool cloak and leather boots covered with snow, fire sparks rising, candles glowing, stone walls behind him, immersive High Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic historical art style, an atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a snowy night in a European castle in 1215, peaceful halls becoming quiet, people sleeping near warm fireplaces, candles slowly burning, snow falling outside ancient stone walls, knights, servants, and noble families resting. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages setting. Cinematic oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle great hall during a snowy winter evening. People gathered around a large crackling fireplace. Servants adjusting candles and carrying wooden cups. Knights and villagers wearing authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing. Warm firelight reflecting on ancient stone walls. Peaceful High Middle Ages atmosphere. realistic historical painting style. A historical painting of medieval servants completing evening tasks inside a castle in the year 1215, one servant lighting candles, another carrying wooden bowls, another closing heavy wooden shutters against the winter wind. Stone floor, wooden furniture, wool clothing, early 13th century European castle life, detailed oil painting texture, a realistic medieval painting of a narrow stone corridor inside a 1215 castle, damp wool cloaks hanging near a fireplace, bundles of herbs attached to wooden beams, cold stone walls illuminated by candlelight, early Gothic architecture, authentic High Middle Ages European interior, atmospheric historical artwork, a peaceful medieval illustration showing the castle as a living community in 1215, ordinary people working together inside a stone fortress, cooks, servants, craftsmen, and families moving through the halls, everyone wearing early 13th century medieval clothing, warm candlelight, realistic oil painting style. A detailed medieval painting of a castle storage room in the year 1215, wooden barrels, baskets of grain, sacks of food supplies, servants organizing winter provisions, stone walls and wooden shelves, early 13th century European Middle Ages setting, realistic historical artwork with painterly brushstrokes, a cinematic oil painting of a medieval castle kitchen in 1215, cooks preparing food beside a large fireplace, iron cooking pots, fresh bread, roasted meat, servants working together, warm fire glow contrasting with snowy darkness outside, authentic early 13th century High Middle Ages atmosphere, a historical medieval painting of a lord's castle interior in 1215, showing the practical design of a fortress. Storage rooms, kitchens, wells, and working areas connected together. People managing daily life. Early 13th century European architecture. Detailed realistic painting style. A medieval oil painting of a traveller climbing narrow, uneven stone stairs inside a 1215 castle. Hand-touching rough, cold stone walls, flickering torchlight creating shadows, ancient fortress architecture, authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic historical illustration. A detailed painting of a medieval castle corridor in 1215 decorated with carved wooden beams and painted symbols near doorways. Nobles and servants walking through the hall. Colourful medieval patterns contrasting with cold stone walls. Early 13th century European artwork style. A peaceful medieval painting of a small room inside a 1215 castle, where villagers and servants gather around a small fireplace telling stories, people laughing, wooden benches, candles glowing, snow visible through a window. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing, cozy historical oil painting, a realistic medieval painting of storytellers in a castle hall during a snowy night in 1215, a group of medieval people sitting round a fire listening to an old tale. Expressive faces, wooden cups, wool cloaks, candlelight, early 13th century European High Middle Ages atmosphere. A historical medieval illustration of a wealthy 1215 noble household displaying exotic animals brought through medieval trade routes. A small monkey and unusual birds inside a castle chamber. Nobles wearing early 13th century clothing, decorated wooden room, realistic Middle Ages painting style. A detailed oil painting of a medieval castle kitchen, storage area, and sleeping quarters in 1215 showing how every room served a purpose. Workers preparing supplies, families resting, candles illuminating stone interiors, Authentic early 13th century European castle life. A cinematic medieval painting of a snowy fortress at night in 1215, thick stone walls protecting a warm community inside. Glowing windows, guards walking along the battlements, snow-covered towers, early 13th century Middle Ages architecture, peaceful historical oil painting, a warm medieval painting of people sharing a simple winter meal inside a castle, great hall in 1215, wooden tables covered with bread and food, families and workers talking together near a fireplace, authentic medieval clothing, cozy high Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic painted artwork. A realistic historical painting of a medieval castle as both a fortress and a home in 1215, powerful stone towers outside and warm human activity inside. Knights, servants, craftsmen, and families living together. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. Detailed oil painting. A peaceful bedtime-style medieval painting of a person sitting beside the fireplace in a 1215 castle, watching flames while the great hall becomes quiet, candles burning low, sleeping areas nearby, snowstorm outside, authentic early 13th century atmosphere, soft historical illustration. A detailed medieval oil painting of a castle courtyard during a snowy winter night in 1215, strong stone walls, closed wooden gates, guards protecting the fortress, smoke rising from chimneys, warm lights from windows, early 13th century European countryside setting. A historical painting of medieval workers inside a castle preparing for sleep after a long winter day, in 1215, servants cleaning tables, people carrying blankets, candles fading, fireplace glowing, showing everyday life of ordinary people in the high Middle Ages. Realistic oil painting style. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a snowy night in a 1215 European castle. The great hall glowing with the last light of the fireplace. People resting peacefully. Candles burning softly. Ancient stone walls holding centuries of memories. Early 13th century Middle Ages setting. Cinematic oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle great hall at night. A large fireplace glowing at the centre. People gathered peacefully around the hearth after a long winter day. Nobles, servants, and families wearing authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing, moving fire shadows across stone walls, cozy high Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A peaceful medieval painting of people sitting beside a massive fireplace inside a castle in 1215, wooden benches covered with cloth cushions. Villagers and nobles warming their hands. Quiet conversations. Candles glowing. Snow falling outside narrow stone windows. Authentic early 13th century European castle interior, detailed oil painting, a cinematic historical painting of a medieval hearth in a 1215 castle, flames rising and casting golden light across ancient stone walls, wooden tables, wool blankets, metal objects reflecting firelight, people relaxing after evening duties, realistic high Middle Ages artwork with soft brush strokes. A realistic medieval oil painting of a great hall winter gathering in the year 1215, people sharing a meal near a large fireplace. Roasted meat, fresh bread, wooden cups, stored winter vegetables on tables, servants and families enjoying a peaceful evening. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. A detailed historical painting showing everyday life inside a medieval castle In 1215, servants caring for household tasks, craftsmen talking, families relaxing, animals resting near the fire, ordinary people wearing wool tunics and medieval dresses, showing the quiet human side of the High Middle Ages. A medieval painting of a noble castle great hall used as a social gathering place in 1215, a long wooden table, tapestries on cold stone walls, nobles and servants sitting together, musicians preparing entertainment, candles and fireplace creating warm light. Authentic early 13th century European history artwork. A realistic oil painting of a medieval castle interior in 1215 showing details of daily life. An old wooden table marked by years of use. Colourful tapestries hanging on stone walls. Metal objects reflecting firelight. Wooden furniture. Early Gothic architecture. Authentic Middle Ages atmosphere. A peaceful medieval illustration of a musician playing softly inside a 1215 castle great hall. People gathered around a fireplace listening to gentle medieval music, simple instruments, candles glowing, knights and villagers wearing early 13th century clothing, warm historical painting style. A detailed medieval painting of a 1215 castle dining scene. People drinking from covered wooden and metal cups designed to protect beverages, servants serving food, candles illuminating the hall, realistic depiction of early 13th century household inventions and daily life. Oil painting texture, a historical oil painting of ordinary conversations inside a medieval castle in 1215, a servant resting after work. A craftsman discussing repairs, a family sharing stories near the fireplace, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing, intimate human moment, realistic medieval artwork, a cinematic medieval painting of storytellers in a 1215 castle hall, an elderly person telling a traditional tale beside the fire, children and adults listening carefully, wooden benches, glowing candles, winter snow outside. Early 13th century European High Middle Ages atmosphere. A cosy bedtime-style medieval painting of a traveller sitting close to a castle fireplace in 1215, warm flames lighting the face. Cold shadows around the hall. People quietly talking in the background. Stone walls and wooden furniture, authentic early 13th century historical illustration, a realistic medieval oil painting showing the balance of hierarchy and community inside a 1215 great hall, noble family seated in an honoured place while servants and workers gather nearby around the same fire, demonstrating social structure of the High Middle Ages. A detailed historical painting of a medieval castle great hall transforming from a busy gathering place into a peaceful night shelter in 1215, candles burning low. People becoming quiet, fireplace glowing, families preparing to sleep. Authentic early 13th century European castle life. A beautiful medieval winter painting of a castle interior at night in 1215, snowstorm outside the stone walls, warm fire protecting the people inside, wooden doors closed, candles flickering, peaceful atmosphere, early 13th century Middle Ages architecture, realistic oil painting style. A historical medieval painting of a 1215 castle household sharing warmth and companionship around a hearth. Knights, servants, children, and craftsmen gathered together. Different social roles but united by the fire. Authentic High Middle Ages European setting. Detailed painted artwork. A cinematic oil painting of a medieval castle great hall during the final hours of evening in 1215, conversations becoming quieter. musicians stopping, candles fading, fireplace remaining bright, people preparing for rest, peaceful early 13th century atmosphere. A realistic medieval landscape painting showing the outside of a 1215 castle during a snowy night. Strong stone walls surrounded by snow-covered rooftops and courtyard. Warm glowing windows showing life inside. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. A detailed medieval painting of a family and villagers resting near a fireplace in a 1215 castle. A dog sleeping beside the hearth. Children listening to stories. Adults sharing quiet conversations. Wooden cups and blankets nearby. Authentic early 13th century daily life. Oil painting style. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a peaceful winter gathering inside a 1215 European castle. The great hall glowing with the last warmth of the fire. People connected through stories and companionship. Snow falling outside ancient stone walls. Early 13th century Middle Ages historical artwork. Cinematic oil painting. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle great hall during a winter evening meal. A large fireplace glowing beside the room. Servants arranging wooden dishes and filling cups. Nobles and workers gathering round tables. Snow falling outside stone windows. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A peaceful medieval painting of a simple winter dinner inside a castle in 1215, people sharing bread, hearty stew, and roasted food near a warm fireplace, wooden bowls and cups on tables, villagers and nobles wearing early 13th century clothing, cozy high Middle Ages, European setting, detailed oil painting. A historical oil painting showing medieval food preparation in a 1215 castle kitchen. Cooks baking bread, stirring large iron pots, preparing vegetables and roasted meat. Wooden shelves filled with supplies. Firelight illuminating stone walls. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages artwork. A realistic medieval painting of bread making in the year 1215, bakers inside a castle kitchen preparing loaves from grain. Wooden tables covered with dough. Stone ovens glowing with fire. Servants working together. Early 13th century European High Middle Ages setting. Detailed historical illustration. A detailed medieval oil painting of a castle dining hall in 1215. Showing social structure during a meal. Nobles seated in honoured places while servants and workers gather nearby. Everyone sharing warmth from the fireplace. Authentic early 13th century European clothing and customs. A cinematic medieval painting of people eating dinner inside a snowy castle in 1215, the sounds of knives. Wooden cups and quiet conversations filling the great hall. Candles glowing on tables. Fireplace casting warm shadows. Realistic, high Middle Ages historical artwork. A cozy medieval illustration of a 1215 winter meal. Wooden bowls filled with stew, fresh bread, roasted ingredients, simple seasonings. Medieval families and workers enjoying food together. Stone castle interior. Early 13th century European atmosphere. Oil painting texture. A historical medieval painting showing the use of bread as a dining tool in 1215, people placing food on thick pieces of bread instead of modern plates. Wooden cups and bowls nearby. Authentic early 13th century dining customs. Realistic Middle Ages artwork. A detailed oil painting of everyday medieval objects inside a 1215 castle. Candles, wool cloth, wooden containers, bread loaves, pottery cups, and household tools showing how people used resources carefully. Early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A peaceful medieval painting of a castle family meal in 1215, children listening to elders telling stories, adults discussing winter journeys and village news, warm fire in the background, wooden tables, candles, authentic early 13th century clothing, realistic historical illustration, a cinematic medieval oil painting of a hidden castle kitchen during a winter night in 1215, cooks moving between fireplaces, checking pots, organizing ingredients, storing food supplies, busy atmosphere contrasting with the quiet great hall. Early 13th century European setting. A realistic medieval painting of a castle meal showing wealth and trade connections in 1215, noble tables decorated with rare spices, imported ingredients, local vegetables, bread and roasted meat, merchants' goods displayed nearby, authentic High Middle Ages European artwork. A detailed historical painting of medieval trade in the year 1215, merchants arriving at a castle with spices, fabrics, and goods from distant regions, knights and servants receiving supplies, snowy countryside background, early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere. A medieval oil painting of a grand castle feast discussion in 1215, nobles hosting an impressive meal to demonstrate power and influence. Decorated tables, musicians, candles, luxurious foods. Early 13th century European aristocratic Middle Ages setting. A realistic medieval painting of an ordinary funny moment during a castle dinner in 1215, a misplaced wooden cup causing laughter, a child reaching for favourite food, tired workers smiling after a long day, warm fireplace, authentic, everyday, High Middle Ages life. A peaceful medieval bedtime-style painting of the final moments of a winter meal inside a 1215 castle. Empty wooden plates, lowered cups, fading conversations, candles burning softly, fireplace still glowing, snow outside. Early 13th century European historical atmosphere. A detailed medieval painting of servants clearing tables after dinner in a 1215 castle great hall. Carrying wooden dishes and cups, people leaving towards sleeping chambers, warm firelight, stone walls, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages interior. A cinematic oil painting of a snowy castle at night in 1215, deep snow covering the courtyard and rooftops. Glowing windows showing a warm dinner inside. Ancient stone towers surrounded by winter darkness. Early 13th century European medieval architecture. A realistic medieval painting of a person sitting beside the fireplace after a shared meal in a 1215 castle. Peaceful expression. Warm flames reflecting on stone walls. Quiet great hall behind. Candles fading. Authentic High Middle Ages bedtime atmosphere. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle after the evening meal. The great hall becoming quiet, fireplace glowing, snow falling outside, hidden corridors and private rooms waiting beyond, people preparing for sleep. Early 13th century Middle Ages historical oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle corridor at night. A traveller leaving the warm great hall and walking through narrow stone passages. Flickering candlelight casting long shadows on ancient walls. Early 13th century Middle Ages architecture. Peaceful high medieval atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a quiet castle hallway in 1215, rough stone walls glowing under candlelight. A person walking alone, carrying the warmth and memory of the fireplace behind them. Cold winter air filling the corridor. Authentic early 13th century European castle interior. Detailed oil painting. A realistic historical painting of a medieval castle corridor at night in 1215 narrow passageways. Stone floors. Hanging herbs near wooden beams. Candles illuminating the walls. Shadows of guards and servants imagined in the background. Early 13th century High Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting showing the hidden life of a 1215 castle. A servant carrying supplies through a stone hallway. A guard walking on night watch. A child exploring a forbidden corridor. Ancient walls witnessing ordinary medieval moments. Authentic early 13th century European setting. A historical painting of a medieval castle that has been expanded over generations, showing different stone sections, repaired walls, mixed architectural styles from different periods, workers maintaining the fortress. Early 13th century European Middle Ages architecture, realistic oil painting style. A realistic medieval painting of a small storage chamber inside a 1215 castle. Wooden shelves filled with tools, cloth, containers, household objects waiting for repair, candlelight reflecting on stone walls, showing everyday survival in the High Middle Ages. Detailed historical artwork. A detailed oil painting of medieval craftsmen repairing household items inside a castle in the 1215 workers mending clothing, fixing wooden tools, restoring containers, organized shelves around them. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages daily life. A medieval historical painting of a working castle environment in 1215, specialized rooms for brewing, food preparation, storage, and hunting equipment. Servants moving between areas, showing that castles were living communities rather than only fortresses. Realistic High Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval painting of a narrow spiral staircase inside a 1215 stone castle tower. A person carefully climbing uneven steps. Candlelight illuminating rough stone walls, defensive architecture built into the fortress, authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A realistic medieval oil painting of a castle tower interior during a snowy night in 1215 narrow stone stairs, wind entering through small openings, snow-covered landscape visible outside, peaceful winter atmosphere. Early 13th century High Middle Ages historical setting. A peaceful medieval painting of a private chamber inside a 1215 castle. A small fireplace glowing softly. Wooden chest. Simple table. Candles. Woven fabrics. A person reading or reflecting alone. Authentic early 13th century European castle interior. Warm oil painting style. A detailed historical painting of a medieval castle room in 1215 showing simple comforts. A dry wool cloak hanging near the fire, wooden furniture, woven blankets, candles, stone walls, demonstrating the value of warmth and safety in the High Middle Ages. A realistic medieval painting showing the contrast between a castle as a home and a fortress in Switzerland 15, thick defensive stone walls outside and comfortable living spaces inside. People resting near fires. Early 13th century European Middle Ages architecture. Detailed oil painting. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a hidden winter storage room inside a 1215 castle. Wooden shelves filled with preserved food, barrels, grain sacks, tools, and supplies, candlelight creating a quiet atmosphere, Authentic early 13th century household preparation. A historical medieval painting showing the unseen labour behind castle comfort. In 1215, servants carrying firewood, cooks preparing supplies, workers repairing stone walls, cleaners maintaining rooms, all working inside a snowy fortress. Realistic High Middle Ages artwork. A beautiful medieval painting of a 1215 castle courtyard viewed from a narrow window at night. Snow covering the ground. Torches creating golden pools of light. Stone towers rising into the snowy sky. Early 13th century European winter landscape. Oil painting style. A detailed medieval illustration of a castle room changing purpose between day and night in 1215. A chamber transformed from a working space into a quiet resting area. Candles glowing. Furniture rearranged, showing the adaptability of medieval households. Historical painting style. A realistic medieval oil painting of a sleeping castle at night in 1215 quiet corridors. Closing wooden doors. Flickering candles. Servants finishing final duties. Snowstorm outside. Ancient stone fortress slowly becoming peaceful. Authentic early 13th century atmosphere. A cinematic medieval painting of a traveller returning through castle corridors toward the great hall fire in 1215, distant warm glow from the fireplace. Silent stone passages. Candles flickering. Snowy night outside. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle at midnight. Hidden rooms, quiet corridors, glowing fireplaces, sleeping inhabitants, snow-covered towers, ancient stone walls holding centuries of human memories. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle at night. A guard walking through a dark stone corridor carrying a burning torch. Golden light reflecting on rough walls. Heavy wool cloak protecting him from winter cold. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a night watch guard inside a 1215 castle, slowly walking through narrow passages while everyone sleeps. Torchlight creating moving shadows across ancient stone walls. Early 13th century European medieval clothing. Peaceful winter night atmosphere. Detailed oil painting. A realistic historical painting of a medieval guard patrolling castle entrances in 1215, checking wooden doors and stone corridors, wearing chainmail under a thick cloak, holding a torch, snowy wind entering through narrow openings, authentic high Middle Ages European fortress setting. A detailed medieval oil painting showing the defensive purpose of a 1215 castle. Thick stone walls, watchtowers, guards protecting the fortress during a snowy night. Torches glowing along battlements. Early 13th century European Middle Ages architecture. Realistic historical artwork. A historical medieval painting of a castle serving many roles in the 1215 noble residence. Administrative centre, justice hall, and workplace, showing nobles, guards, servants, and workers inside a large stone fortress. Authentic early 13th century High Middle Ages setting. A realistic medieval painting of a castle worker carrying supplies through a quiet corridor in 1215, bundles of cloth and food ingredients in his hands. Candlelight illuminating stone walls, showing the hidden preparation work of medieval life. early 13th century European atmosphere. A cinematic oil painting of a 1215 medieval castle courtyard during a snowstorm at night. Heavy wooden doors opening to reveal snow-covered ground. Torchlight reflecting on white snow. Stone towers disappearing into darkness. Authentic, early 13th century European winter setting. A peaceful medieval painting of workers maintaining a castle during a snowy night in 1215, checking fires, protecting supplies, caring for animals, and preparing for winter conditions, showing everyday responsibilities of high Middle Ages life. Detailed historical artwork. A detailed medieval oil painting of horses and stable workers inside a 1215 castle stable at night. Horses resting on hay, a worker checking their condition, lantern light glowing, cold winter air outside. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages environment. A realistic historical painting of medieval animals as part of castle life in 1215, horses in stables, hunting dogs near the courtyard, workers caring for them, snowy fortress background, showing the importance of animals in early 13th century daily life. A cinematic medieval painting of a stable area inside a snowy castle in 1215, hay stacked near wooden stalls. Horses quietly resting. A stable worker carrying a lantern. Warm light contrasting with cold winter night. Authentic high Middle Ages oil painting style. A detailed medieval illustration of a silent castle corridor at midnight in 1215, empty stone halls, distant torchlight, closed wooden doors, subtle sounds of footsteps and fabric movement, ancient fortress atmosphere, realistic early 13th century historical painting. A realistic medieval oil painting showing a sleeping castle community in 1215, people resting in simple chambers while guards patrol outside. Warm fireplaces glowing. Stone walls protecting everyone. Early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere. A historical medieval painting of a night guard creating safety and order inside a 1215 castle. A lone figure walking through darkness with a torch while families sleep peacefully behind stone walls. Emotional high Middle Ages artwork. A detailed medieval oil painting of a castle storage room in 1215. Organised tools hanging on wooden walls. Ropes, lanterns, repair materials, and equipment carefully arranged. Candlelight illuminating the workspace. Authentic early 13th century craftsmanship. A realistic medieval painting showing candle use in a 1215 castle. A person carefully lighting a single candle in a dark room. Expensive artificial light being preserved. Stone walls and wooden furniture surrounding the scene. Early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A peaceful medieval bedtime painting of a guard walking beneath snowy castle towers in 1215, torch glowing against falling snow. Quiet courtyard. Ancient stone walls. Winter night sky. Authentic early 13th century European historical atmosphere. A cinematic oil painting of a medieval castle returning to silence after midnight in 1215, guards continuing their rounds. Fireplaces glowing inside. Snow covering rooftops and courtyards, showing the hidden work that keeps the fortress alive. High Middle Ages setting. A detailed historical painting of a person returning from a cold castle patrol to the warmth of the great hall in 1215, fireplace glowing ahead. Contrast between dark corridors and warm interior. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle beneath falling snow at midnight. Guards walking quietly. Horses resting. Fireplaces glowing. sleeping inhabitants protected inside ancient stone walls. Early 13th century Middle Ages oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle great hall at night. People gathered around a large fireplace listening to a storyteller. Warm flames illuminating faces. Shadows dancing on ancient stone walls. Nobles. Servants and children wearing authentic early 13th century Middle Ages clothing. Peaceful high medieval atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a storyteller sitting beside a fireplace in a 1215 castle, speaking calmly to a circle of listeners, firelight glowing on faces, wooden benches, candles, stone walls, and winter darkness outside. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. A realistic historical oil painting of medieval oral storytelling in the year 1215, families and workers gathered around the hearth. An elder telling traditional tales, children listening carefully, people reacting with smiles and curiosity. Early 13th century European castle life. Detailed painting style. A detailed medieval painting showing a storyteller's voice, becoming the centre of a castle gathering in 12 and 15 close-up of expressive faces around the fire. Listeners wearing wool cloaks and medieval garments. Warm candlelight. Authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A historical medieval oil painting of oral tradition in a 1215 castle. An older person sharing stories passed down through generations. Listeners remembering family histories, songs, and legends. Great hall fireplace glowing. Early 13th century European Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval painting of a snowy winter night inside a 1215 castle. People listening to a tale about a dangerous forest journey. Storyteller beside the fire. Dark woods imagined in the background. Warm shelter contrasting with cold outside. Realistic medieval illustration. A fantasy-inspired but historically accurate medieval painting of a 1215 castle storytelling scene. Listeners imagining mysterious forests, magical creatures, and legendary adventures while sitting around a fireplace. Early 13th century clothing. Authentic Middle Ages atmosphere. Detailed oil painting. A realistic medieval oil painting showing medieval villagers and nobles discussing folk tales in a castle hall in 1215, people sharing ideas about nature, storms, luck, morality, and mysterious events, warm firelight, early 13th century European historical setting. A detailed medieval painting of listeners reacting to a traditional tale in a 1215 castle. Children watching with wonder, adults smiling. An older person adding details to the story. Candles flickering. Wooden furniture. Authentic High Middle Ages daily life. A peaceful medieval illustration of a family gathering around a fire in a 1215 castle. Multiple generations sharing stories, laughter and memories. No stage or performance, just a warm room, wooden benches, stone walls, early 13th century European Middle Ages painting style. A cinematic oil painting of medieval humour and storytelling in 1215, a performer telling a funny tale about a foolish traveller. People laughing around the fireplace, relaxed atmosphere, wooden cups and candles nearby, authentic early 13th century castle interior, a realistic historical painting of a medieval travelling entertainer in 1215, a musician and storyteller arriving at a castle with a small instrument, sharing songs, poems, jokes, and news between communities. Snowy road background, early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a travelling bard performing inside a 1215 castle hall, holding a musical instrument while nobles, servants, and children listen near the fire, candlelight illuminating the scene, authentic High Middle Ages entertainment. A historical medieval painting of a castle great hall where stories preserve memories in 12 and 15 stone walls covered with shadows. Generations of people represented through portraits and storytelling scenes. Fireplace glowing. Early 13th century European artwork. A realistic medieval painting of a storyteller's hands moving while telling an ancient tale in a 1215 castle. Listeners sitting silently around the fire, close attention. Warm flames, wooden beams, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. A peaceful medieval bedtime painting of the final moments of a story session in a 1215 castle. Storyteller finishing the tale, listeners quietly appreciating the ending. Fire burning low, candles glowing softly, snow falling outside. Realistic oil painting style. A cinematic medieval oil painting of the silence after a great story inside a 1215 castle. People sitting peacefully near the fireplace. Some discussing the tale, others enjoying quiet reflection. Warm firelight. Early 13th century European setting. A detailed historical painting of a 1215 medieval castle at night. The great hall filled with memories of past generations. Ancient stone walls surrounding people sharing stories. Celebrations. Friendships. And quiet evenings. Authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A realistic medieval oil painting of a winter night storytelling scene in a European castle in 1215, snow outside the windows. Guards watching from towers. Warm fireplace inside. Imagination and community bringing comfort. Early 13th century Middle Ages artwork. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle deep into the night. Storyteller and listeners slowly becoming quiet beside the fireplace. Candles fading. Snow covering the fortress outside. Ancient stone walls holding centuries of voices and memories. Cinematic historical oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle courtyard at night. A heavy wooden door opening to reveal a snowy landscape. A person standing at the entrance feeling the cold winter air. Moonlight reflecting on fresh snow. Early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a snow-covered castle courtyard in 1215, ancient stone towers and walls covered with fresh snow. Moonlight creating a peaceful glow, empty paths and quiet winter atmosphere. Authentic early 13th century European High Middle Ages setting. A realistic historical oil painting of a medieval castle transformed by winter in 1215 snow, softening the sharp shapes of towers and stone buildings, frozen rooftops, peaceful courtyard, early 13th century European Middle Ages architecture, detailed painterly style. A detailed medieval painting of a traveller walking slowly through a snowy castle courtyard in 1215, footprints appearing in fresh snow. Quiet stone walls surrounding the path. Moonlit winter night. Authentic early 13th century European historical artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle surrounded by snowy fields and leafless frost-covered trees. Distant village roads covered by winter snow. Dark countryside under a bright moon. early 13th century European Middle Ages landscape, realistic painting style. A historical medieval painting showing how winter shaped daily life in a 1215 European village and castle. Farmers preparing for cold months, people storing supplies, snowy fields, animals near homes, authentic early 13th century seasonal life, detailed oil painting, a cinematic medieval painting of a person standing on a 1215 castle wall at night, one hand touching cold stone, looking over a snowy landscape outside while warm lights glow inside the fortress. Early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic historical artwork, a realistic medieval oil painting of a snowy castle wall at midnight in 1215 frost-covered stones, torchlight along the battlements, a guard watching the silent landscape, strong contrast between warm castle interior and cold winter outside, authentic high Middle Ages setting, a detailed medieval painting of nature surrounding a 1215 castle during winter, a fox or small animal moving through snow, a bird resting on a dark tree branch, frost-covered forest, ancient fortress in the background, early 13th century European landscape artwork, a peaceful historical painting of a medieval castle dog walking through fresh snow at night in 1215 paw prints across the courtyard, stone towers behind, lantern light glowing nearby, showing animals as part of everyday high Middle Ages life. A realistic medieval oil painting of a winter night in a 1215 castle courtyard. Workers and guards observing weather signs, looking at snowfall and animal movements, showing medieval connections between nature and daily life. Early 13th century European atmosphere. A cinematic medieval painting of a lone guard watching over a snowy castle from a high tower in 1215, a small torch burning against the darkness. Moonlit fields below, peaceful but protective atmosphere. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages artwork. A detailed medieval oil painting of a young person standing on a castle tower in 1215, looking across snowy fields and dreaming of distant lands, stars shining above, ancient stone walls, early 13th century European romantic historical scene, a realistic historical painting of a medieval night sky above a 1215 castle, countless bright stars visible without modern city lights, a person standing beneath the sky near stone walls, peaceful connection between past and present, early 13th century Middle Ages style, a detailed medieval painting showing how people measured time in 1215 church bells ringing in a distant village, castle workers following daily routines, meals, daylight, and seasonal rhythms, authentic early 13th century European life, historical oil painting, a peaceful medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle as a witness to centuries of history, ancient stone walls covered with snow, images of generations of people living inside, storms passing, families gathering, early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere, a cinematic winter painting of gentle snowfall over a medieval castle in 1215, snowflakes softening the landscape, silent towers, empty courtyard, warm glowing windows, peaceful reflective mood, authentic early 13th century high Middle Ages artwork, a realistic medieval painting of a traveller returning from a snowy courtyard into a 1215 castle entrance, heavy wooden doors closing behind them, cold wind outside and warm firelight inside, early 13th century European historical setting, A detailed oil painting of a 1215 castle interior after a snowy night walk. Fireplace glowing in the great hall. Quiet corridors, candles burning. People resting peacefully, showing the contrast between winter outside and warmth inside the medieval fortress. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle beneath falling snow. Ancient stone walls, glowing tower lights, silent winter landscape, peaceful inhabitants resting inside. Early 13th century Middle Ages historical oil painting style. Cinematic and calming mood. A detailed medieval oil painting of a private noble chamber inside a 1215 European castle at night. A noble person sitting beside a small fireplace reading documents by candlelight. Wooden table with letters and personal belongings. Stone walls. Early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a noble figure in a 1215 castle room after a long winter day. Quietly reviewing messages and letters beside a flickering candle. Warm firelight creating a peaceful private atmosphere. Authentic, early 13th century European High Middle Ages setting. A realistic historical oil painting of a medieval lord's private study in 1215 wooden desk covered with parchment documents. Wax seals, letters, ink containers, candles, and personal objects, showing the administrative side of castle life. Early 13th century European artwork. A detailed medieval painting of a noble household administrator in 1215 reviewing estate records, supplies, and village reports inside a stone castle chamber. Candlelight illuminating manuscripts. Authentic High Middle Ages European clothing and interior design. A historical medieval oil painting showing a 1215 noble person managing castle responsibilities. Studying letters about land, resources, disputes, and alliances. Quiet winter night atmosphere. Wooden furniture. Early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. A realistic medieval painting of a messenger delivering letters to a noble household inside a 1215 castle. A messenger handing sealed documents to a noble figure near a fireplace. Winter clothing. Candlelit stone chamber. Authentic early 13th century historical artwork. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a noble person sitting alone in thought inside a 1215 castle room. Reflecting on harvests, supplies, family alliances, and future challenges. Small fireplace glowing, snow visible outside the window, peaceful high Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval painting of a candlelit castle chamber in 1215, a noble figure writing or reading parchment by hand. Quill, ink pot, wax seals. Wooden shelves. Early 13th century European manuscript culture. Realistic historical painting style. A realistic historical oil painting of medieval scribes creating precious manuscripts in a 1215 castle. Skilled artists writing on parchment, decorating letters, preparing documents. Candles illuminating the workspace. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages craftsmanship. A detailed medieval painting of valuable objects inside a noble chamber in 1215 sealed documents. Jewellery. Carved wooden keepsakes. Family treasures. And important letters displayed on a wooden table. Showing personal and political meaning in the High Middle Ages. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a noble person storing important documents and personal belongings in a 1215 castle chamber. Wooden shelves, parchment scrolls, wax seals, candles, quiet private atmosphere. early 13th century European historical setting, a realistic medieval painting showing the contrast between noble privilege and responsibility in 1250. A wealthy noble wearing fine medieval clothing while surrounded by administrative duties, letters, estate records, and decisions affecting the castle community. A cinematic medieval oil painting of different members of a 1215 castle community. Noble person in a private chamber. Servant organizing supplies. Guard on patrol. Worker caring for animals, showing how every role supports the medieval fortress. A detailed historical painting of a small private fireplace chamber inside a 1215 castle, a noble figure resting beside a quiet fire, wooden chair, candles, simple furnishings, peaceful reflection after a long day. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A realistic medieval oil painting of a noble person looking at a personal keepsake in a 1215 castle room. A carved object or piece of jewellery held carefully. Candlelight reflecting on emotional memories, showing the human side of medieval individuals. A historical medieval painting of an educated noble in 1215 studying books, religious texts, languages, and documents inside a castle chamber, showing medieval learning beyond warfare. Early 13th century European intellectual life, detailed oil painting style. A cinematic medieval illustration of a noble person and trusted companion quietly discussing family matters, castle repairs, and future plans in 1215 sitting beside a fireplace. Intimate conversation, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting of a snowy night outside a noble castle chamber, in 1215 snow covering the landscape. Warm candlelight shining through a narrow window. Noble person working inside. Contrast between winter darkness and indoor warmth. A realistic historical painting of a 1215 castle corridor at night. A traveller leaving a noble chamber. Candle flames guiding the way. Stone walls. Quiet passages. Distant fireplace glow. Early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle during the deepest hours of night. Noble chambers, workers' rooms, and great hall connected together. Candles burning softly, snow falling outside, showing the castle as a network of human lives. Early 13th century Middle Ages oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle servant area at night. Workers carrying folded cloth, organising supplies, and completing final tasks after dinner. Narrow stone corridors, candlelight illuminating practical workspaces. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A realistic medieval painting of servants working behind the scenes inside a 1215 castle. Small rooms filled with storage shelves, cloth, wooden containers, and household supplies, showing the hidden labour that keeps the fortress running. Early 13th century European High Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a servant cleaning a great hall after an evening gathering in 1215, empty wooden tables replacing the earlier feast. Candles burning low, stone walls covered in shadows, peaceful transition from activity to rest. Authentic Middle Ages setting. A detailed historical painting of medieval castle workers in 1215 preparing for the next day. One servant covering supplies. Another checking food storage. Another organising household objects. warm candlelight, early 13th century European castle interior, realistic oil painting style. A realistic medieval oil painting showing the many workers needed to operate a 1215 castle. Cooks, cleaners, stable workers, craftsmen, messengers, and attendants moving through different areas of the fortress. Authentic High Middle Ages community life. A peaceful medieval painting of servants gathering briefly in a small castle room in 1215 after a long day of work. Workers sitting together near a small fire, quietly talking and sharing humour. Simple furniture, candles, early 13th century European atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting of experienced castle workers passing practical knowledge in 1215, an older kitchen worker, teaching food preservation and herbs to a younger servant. Warm candlelight, wooden shelves, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages life. A realistic historical painting of a medieval stable worker in 1215 caring for horses, checking animals, preparing hay, and understanding their needs. Wooden stable interior, lantern light, snowy castle courtyard outside, early 13th century European artwork. A detailed medieval painting of a servant repairing clothing beside a candle in a 1215 castle, carefully stitching a torn wool garment, sewing tools nearby, valuable fabric being preserved, stone wall background, authentic High Middle Ages domestic scene, a cinematic oil painting of a medieval servant's workspace in 1215, candles lighting a narrow room filled with tools, cloth, containers, and repair materials, showing skilled workers maintaining castle life. Early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A historical medieval painting of the relationship between nobles and servants inside a 1215 castle. Workers supporting daily life while nobles depend on their skills. Different social roles shown together in a warm stone interior. Realistic early 13th century artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting showing a skilled servant confidently walking through a dark castle corridor in 1215, knowing every passage and doorway. Carrying supplies with a candle lantern. Ancient stone walls around them, authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval painting of a servant moving through a quiet 1215 castle at night. Fewer candles burning, deep shadows between rooms, familiar corridors becoming like home. Early 13th century European fortress interior. Cinematic historical style. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a castle worker creating small comforts in 1215, a favourite resting place beside a warm stone wall, a carefully stored personal tool, simple belongings showing individuality, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages life, a realistic historical painting of a tired servant warming hands beside a small fireplace inside a 1215 castle, pausing briefly after work, candlelight on their face, simple clothing, emotional human moment in the High Middle Ages, a detailed medieval oil painting of final nighttime preparations inside a 1215 castle, servants checking fires, securing wooden doors, organizing supplies, and preparing the fortress for sleep. Snowy winter night outside, authentic early 13th century setting. A cinematic medieval painting of a castle becoming silent after midnight in 1215, servants walking towards sleeping chambers, empty corridors, distant footsteps, fading candlelight, ancient stone walls creating a peaceful atmosphere, realistic historical artwork. A realistic medieval painting of exhausted servants, resting after a long day inside a 1215 castle. Simple sleeping area with wooden beds, wool blankets, candles, showing ordinary workers' lives in the early 13th century Middle Ages. A detailed medieval oil painting of a quiet castle corridor at night in 1215, soft firelight spreading across stone walls, shadows of workers leaving, snow and wind outside, showing beauty in ordinary moments of care and effort. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 12th and 15 European castle preparing for sleep. Servants finishing their duties, fireplaces glowing, candles fading, snow falling outside ancient walls, hidden workers finally resting. Early 13th century Middle Ages historical oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle sleeping chamber at night. A simple wooden bed covered with thick wool blankets, storage chest, candles, and stone walls. A person preparing for sleep. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A peaceful medieval painting of a quiet castle corridor leading to sleeping chambers in 1215, a few candles glowing against dark stone walls, servants and guards disappearing into the shadows, snowy winter night outside, early 13th century European High Middle Ages setting. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle bedroom at night. Warm candlelight illuminating a wooden bed, heavy blankets, wooden chest, and simple furnishings, showing the private side of medieval life. Authentic, early 13th century historical artwork. A realistic historical painting of medieval sleeping arrangements in 1215, different chambers inside a European castle showing beds, blankets, storage chests, and varying levels of comfort according to social status. Early 13th century Middle Ages interior design. A detailed medieval oil painting of a wealthy noble sleeping chamber in a 1215 castle. Decorated wooden bed. Fine fabrics, embroidered blankets, carved furniture, candles, stone walls, showing high-status medieval comfort. Authentic early 13th century European style. A realistic medieval painting of an ordinary worker's sleeping area inside a 1215 castle. Simple wooden bed, rough blankets, small chest, candlelight, modest furnishings, showing everyday life of common people in the High Middle Ages. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a person sitting beside a medieval bed in 1215, touching thick wool blankets while snow falls outside a small window. Cold stone walls, candle glow, peaceful winter night atmosphere. Authentic Middle Ages setting. A detailed historical painting of a medieval bedroom in 1215 without modern heating. Thick blankets protecting sleepers from winter cold. Small fireplace in the distance, candles providing limited light. Early 13th century European castle environment. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a person lying beneath layers of wool blankets in a 1215 castle chamber. Listening to distant guards, wind against stone walls, and a faraway fireplace. Cozy but historically accurate early 13th century atmosphere. A realistic medieval painting showing shared sleeping spaces in a 1215 castle. Multiple people resting in the same warm chamber because space and heating were limited. Wooden beds, wool blankets, candlelight. Authentic early 13th century European household life. A detailed medieval oil painting of a wooden chest beside a bed in a 1215 castle room. Clothing, personal belongings, and valuable objects stored inside, showing practical multifunctional medieval furniture, early 13th century historical artwork, a cinematic medieval painting of a quiet bedroom inside a 1215 castle during winter night, moonlight entering through a small stone window, snow reflecting pale light, wooden furniture, peaceful sleeping atmosphere, realistic high Middle Ages oil painting style, a historical medieval painting of a castle bedroom organised around natural light in 1215 candles burning low, darkness surrounding the room, a person preparing for early rest, showing medieval daily rhythms without modern lighting, authentic early 13th century setting, a realistic medieval oil painting of a person waking inside a 1215 castle at dawn, first sunlight entering through a narrow window, servants beginning morning tasks outside, wooden bed and blankets nearby, early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere, a detailed medieval painting showing a bed as a symbol of security in 1215, a tired traveller or worker resting peacefully after a long day, warm blankets, candlelight, stone chamber, authentic High Middle Ages historical artwork, a realistic medieval oil painting of several sleeping chambers inside a 1215 castle, some rooms larger and warmer near fireplaces, others simpler and colder, showing social differences through medieval architecture and furnishings, a cinematic medieval painting of a silent castle interior at midnight in 1215, sleeping chambers behind wooden doors, fading fireplaces, dim candles, snow falling outside, ancient stone walls creating a peaceful dreamlike atmosphere, a detailed historical painting of a 1215 medieval castle at its deepest quiet, noble family sleeping in private rooms, servants resting after work, guards staying awake on patrol, showing different lives within the same fortress, a peaceful medieval bedtime story painting of a person quietly leaving sleeping chambers inside a 1215 castle, soft firelight on stone corridors, sleeping inhabitants behind doors, gentle snowfall outside, authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages style, an atmospheric medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle asleep beneath a snowy midnight sky, wooden beams above sleeping rooms, candles fading, fireplaces glowing softly, dreams and hopes of medieval inhabitants resting within ancient stone walls, cinematic historical painting style, a detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle at midnight, quiet upper rooms beneath wooden beams, candles burning low, sleeping chambers behind closed doors, ancient stone walls covered in shadows, peaceful early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere, realistic historical painting style, a cinematic medieval painting of a person walking silently through a sleeping castle corridor in 1215 carrying a candle while the fortress rests, wooden beams above, stone walls, soft firelight, snow falling outside narrow windows, authentic High Middle Ages setting, a realistic historical oil painting of a quiet medieval castle interior at night in 1215, a distant fireplace glowing softly, empty great hall, fading candles, servants and nobles asleep behind wooden doors, early 13th century European atmosphere, a detailed medieval painting of the nighttime sounds of a 1215 castle, wind moving around stone walls, wooden beams creaking, a small fireplace crackling, a peaceful empty corridor illuminated by candlelight, authentic early 13th century Middle Ages artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting showing dreams inside a 1215 castle. A sleeping child dreaming of adventures. A worker dreaming of warmer seasons. A noble person dreaming of family and memories. Symbolic medieval bedroom scenes. Early 13th century European style. A historical medieval painting of a 1215 castle bedroom where a sleeping person rests beneath wool blankets. Candlelight glowing nearby. Peaceful expression. Wooden furniture. Stone walls. Showing medieval sleep and nighttime comfort. Realistic oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of medieval dream traditions in 1215, a sleeping figure surrounded by symbolic visions of journeys, stars, family memories, and spiritual imagery, reflecting early 13th century beliefs about dreams, authentic Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval painting of a snowy castle window at night in 1215 white fields, frozen trees and covered paths outside, moonlight reflecting on the snow, candle glow inside, peaceful winter atmosphere, early 13th century European historical setting. A realistic medieval oil painting of a person praying or quietly reflecting before sleep inside a 1215 castle chamber. Hands folded near a candle. Simple wooden furniture. Wool fabrics. Spiritual medieval bedtime tradition. Authentic early 13th century atmosphere. A detailed historical painting of a single candle burning inside a medieval castle room in 1215, warm golden light surrounding a small area of darkness. Wooden table, stone walls, showing the importance of candlelight in early 13th century daily life. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a person sitting quietly beside a candle at night in a 1215 castle. Thinking about memories and dreams. Snow visible through a small window. Soft shadows. Authentic high Middle Ages interior. A realistic historical medieval painting of a noble or scholar studying medieval dream beliefs in a 1215 castle. Parchment writings. Candles. Books. And spiritual symbols. Showing how educated people interpreted dreams in the early 13th century. A cinematic medieval painting of a person imagining dreams while sitting alone in a quiet castle chamber in 1215, visions of journeys, loved ones, and everyday life blending together. Warm candlelight, early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A detailed medieval oil painting showing a castle itself as a living memory. Ancient stone walls, worn floors, wooden beams, and shadows representing generations of people who lived inside. Peaceful winter night atmosphere. Historical artwork. A realistic medieval painting of a 1215 sleeping chamber, using natural materials for comfort. Thick wool blankets, feather bedding, woven fabrics, wooden bed frame, candlelight, showing medieval attempts to create warmth and rest. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a person looking down from an upper castle floor in 1215, viewing sleeping rooms below. Snowy courtyard outside. Torches glowing in the darkness, moonlight reflecting on stone walls, early 13th century atmosphere, a historical medieval painting of a 1215 castle during a gentle snowstorm at night, peaceful towers covered in snow, glowing torches, silent courtyards, sleeping inhabitants protected inside. Authentic high Middle Ages European landscape, A detailed medieval oil painting of ordinary people sleeping inside a 1215 castle, noble families, workers, and guards shown in different rooms, each experiencing the same winter night differently. Realistic early 13th century human-centered artwork. A peaceful bedtime-style medieval painting of the Great Hall after midnight in a 1215 castle. The fireplace glowing faintly, empty wooden tables, fading candles, quiet stone walls holding memories of evening stories. Authentic Middle Ages atmosphere. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle beneath a deep winter night. Wooden beams, sleeping chambers, fading candlelight, gentle snowfall, hundreds of dreams hidden within ancient stone walls, cinematic early 13th century oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle during the deepest winter night. Upper towers covered in snow. Gentle snowfall surrounding ancient stone walls. Warm firelight glowing from windows. Peaceful, protected atmosphere. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a person looking through a narrow castle window in 1215 watching snow fall across dark fields. Moonlight reflecting on white landscapes. Candlelight behind them. Early 13th century European winter atmosphere. Realistic oil painting. A realistic historical oil painting of a 1215 medieval castle surrounded by a snowy countryside. Frozen fields, leafless trees covered with frost, hidden roads beneath snow, ancient stone fortress standing quietly. Authentic high Middle Ages European landscape. A detailed medieval painting showing winter life in a 1215 castle. Servants organising stored food, preserved supplies, and winter materials while snow falls outside, showing how medieval communities prepared for harsh seasons. Early 13th century European artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting of people in a 1215 castle, observing the winter sky, watching clouds, animals, and weather signs to predict storms. Villagers and nobles gathered near a window. Authentic, early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. A cinematic medieval painting of a small group of castle inhabitants awake during a snowy night in 1215, sitting together near a fireplace and discussing the storm outside. Candles glowing, wooden furniture, stone chamber, realistic historical artwork, a detailed medieval oil painting of an elderly storyteller inside a 1215 castle sharing a winter legend. People gathered around a fire listening carefully. Mysterious snowy landscapes imagined in the background. Early 13th century European folklore atmosphere. A realistic historical painting of medieval folklore and winter stories in 1215, families listening to tales about mysterious travellers, hidden paths, and snowy forests, showing how stories carried lessons about survival and nature. Authentic Middle Ages style. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a snowy forest near a 1215 castle. A traveller moving carefully through frozen paths while imagined legends and folklore surround the scene. Early 13th century European winter landscape. Detailed historical fantasy artwork. A detailed medieval painting showing practical wisdom hidden inside medieval stories in 1215 villagers preparing for travel through snow, gathering supplies, listening to elders' advice, castle walls in the background, authentic early 13th century life. A realistic medieval oil painting of a silent castle corridor during a winter storm in 1215, wind moving around stone walls, candles flickering, shadows stretching across the floor. Peaceful but mysterious High Middle Ages atmosphere. A historical medieval painting of a person standing beside a castle window in 1215, comparing modern and medieval ways of understanding weather. Snowy landscape outside, candlelight inside, symbolic connection between science and tradition, realistic artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a snow-covered 1215 castle surrounded by silence. Distant villages hidden in darkness. Roads disappearing under snow, only the fortress visible under moonlight. Early 13th century European winter setting. A cinematic medieval painting of families gathering around a fireplace during a snowy night in a 1215 castle, sharing winter traditions, meals, and stories while the outside world is covered in snow. Warm community atmosphere. Authentic Middle Ages style. A detailed historical painting of medieval winter animals around a 1215 castle. Horses inside a stable. Dogs guarding the courtyard. Birds adapting to snow. Workers caring for animals. Showing the connection between humans and nature in the early 13th century. A realistic medieval oil painting of castle inhabitants studying seasonal changes in 1215, observing plants, animals, and weather patterns to plan farming and daily activities. Early 13th century European knowledge and traditions. Detailed historical artwork. A peaceful medieval painting of a person sitting quietly inside a 1215 castle chamber while snow falls outside. Candles glowing softly, fireplace burning steadily, reflecting on winter, history, and human connection. Authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a castle accepting the winter night in 1215, people sleeping peacefully inside warm rooms, snow covering towers and courtyards, fires glowing, ancient stone fortress blending with nature, realistic historical style. A detailed medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle before dawn, candles burning low, sleeping inhabitants, gentle snowstorm outside, quiet towers and stone walls holding centuries of winter memories, early 13th century Middle Ages artwork, an atmospheric medieval oil painting of a snowy morning approaching a 1215 castle, first light appearing over frozen fields, towers covered in snow, inhabitants beginning to wake after a peaceful winter night. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages setting. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle at dawn. The first morning light appearing over snow-covered towers. Gentle snowfall ending. Warm firelight glowing from windows. The fortress slowly waking after a peaceful winter night. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. A cinematic medieval painting of a quiet castle corridor in the early morning of 1215, a servant opening a wooden door. Another person carrying supplies. Candles fading as daylight enters. Stone walls illuminated by soft winter light. Realistic historical artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting of servants restarting a fireplace inside a 1215 castle great hall at dawn. Adding logs to the fire. Warm flames returning. Wooden tables and stone walls revealed by morning light. Authentic early 13th century European setting. A detailed historical painting of a medieval castle great hall in the morning after a snowy night. Wooden tables, tapestries, and decorations becoming visible in the pale daylight. Servants preparing the room. early 13th century High Middle Ages atmosphere. A realistic medieval painting showing morning routines inside a 12th and 15 castle. Servants organizing supplies, preparing food, strengthening fires, and arranging household objects, demonstrating the importance of daily organization in the Middle Ages. A cinematic oil painting of a medieval castle kitchen, awakening at dawn in 1215, cooks bringing ingredients forward, fires burning stronger, wooden containers and tools being prepared, warm light mixing with winter shadows, authentic early 13th century artwork, a detailed medieval painting of servants beginning their morning duties in a snowy castle in 1215, carrying supplies through stone corridors, preparing rooms and organizing tasks, showing the hidden work behind daily medieval life. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a snow-covered castle courtyard at sunrise in 1215, fresh footprints partially covered by snow. Pale morning sky. Stone towers standing clearly after the storm. Early 13th century European winter landscape. A realistic historical painting of medieval seasonal routines in 1215. Villagers and castle workers using natural light and traditional habits to organize their morning activities, preparing tools, food, and work areas. Authentic High Middle Ages setting. A detailed medieval oil painting of stable workers returning in the morning at a 1215 castle, feeding horses, cleaning stalls, carrying hay. Snowy courtyard outside, showing animals as an essential part of medieval daily life. A cinematic medieval painting of a 1215 castle courtyard, changing from mysterious night to clear morning. Moonlight fading. Sunlight revealing towers and walls. Workers walking through the snow. Realistic early 13th century historical atmosphere. A realistic medieval oil painting showing the relationship between a castle and surrounding countryside in 1215 fortress walls overlooking villages, farms, roads, and fields covered in snow, demonstrating the connection between authority and everyday life. A detailed historical painting of a medieval village near a 1215 castle at morning. Farmers preparing tools, villagers caring for animals, people beginning daily tasks, smoke rising from homes, authentic early 13th century European community life. A peaceful medieval painting of villagers and castle inhabitants exchanging goods and information in 1215 merchants, workers, and farmers connected through trade and labour. Snowy countryside background. Realistic High Middle Ages artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting of bread making inside a 1215 castle kitchen during morning hours. Bakers preparing dough, ovens burning, workers organizing ingredients, showing the careful preparation behind medieval meals. Early 13th century European setting. A detailed medieval painting of fresh bread being prepared in a 1215 castle after a winter night. Warm kitchen filled with the smell of baking bread. Wooden tables, flour, ovens, servants working together. Authentic Middle Ages atmosphere. A cinematic medieval oil painting of a castle. Morning without modern technology in 1215, people waking according to daylight. Sounds and routines. No clocks or machines. Peaceful natural rhythm. Early 13th century European historical style. A realistic historical painting of the same great hall fireplace from the night before now glowing softly in the morning of 1215, servants working around it. Memories of stories and meals remaining. Warm medieval atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle. returning to daily activity after a snowy night. Workers carrying supplies, cooks preparing food, guards changing shifts. Stone fortress filled with movement again, authentic early 13th century setting. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story-style painting of a 1215 European castle, morning after a peaceful winter night. Snow-covered landscape outside, warm halls inside, people beginning a new day, showing human warmth, connection, and daily life in the early 13th century Middle Ages. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle great hall in the morning after a snowy night. Sunlight entering through stone windows. Servants preparing wooden tables. Memories of the previous evening around the fireplace. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a traveller walking through a bright castle corridor in 1215 after dawn. Night shadows replaced by soft morning light. Stone walls revealing details. Servants returning to daily routines. Early 13th century European historical setting. A realistic historical oil painting of a 1215 castle great hall filled with quiet morning activity. Wooden tables being prepared, fireplace glowing softly, workers moving through the room, showing the transition from nighttime gathering to daily life. A detailed medieval painting of a person touching an old wooden table inside a 1215 castle, imagining centuries of meals and conversations that happened there. Warm morning light, stone walls, early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a snowy castle courtyard in the morning of 1215, fresh snow covering roads and fields. Footprints fading beneath the snow, distant villages and farmland becoming visible. Authentic high Middle Ages winter landscape. A realistic medieval painting showing familiar routines inside a 1215 castle. People preparing meals, tending fires, organising rooms, and following traditional daily habits, demonstrating comfort through repetition in early 13th century life. A cinematic medieval oil painting showing different people in a 1215 castle after a winter night. A guard returning from patrol, a servant organising supplies, a storyteller resting, and a noble reflecting, each experiencing the same environment differently. A detailed historical painting of medieval social life in 1215 showing both hardships and comforts, workers cooperating inside a stone castle, families sharing warmth, craftsmen working, and nobles managing responsibilities. Realistic early 13th century artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting of an ancient 1215 castle imagined generations later. New inhabitants walking through old halls while memories of past residents remain. Weathered stone walls, timeless historical atmosphere. A cinematic medieval painting of a 1215 castle interior showing different spaces connected by human stories. The great hall with fireplace, narrow guard corridors, sleeping chambers, and working areas. Authentic early 13th century European Middle Ages style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a castle connected to the wider world in 1215, merchants arriving with goods, travellers carrying messages, trade routes leading from villages to the fortress, snowy countryside background, historical high Middle Ages setting. A realistic medieval painting of medieval communication and trade in 1215, messengers delivering letters, merchants bringing supplies, villagers exchanging goods near a castle, showing that castles were connected communities. Early 13th century European artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a person sitting beside the fireplace in a 1215 castle during morning, watching flames that look familiar from the previous night. Quiet reflection. Candles fading. Sunlight entering the hall. A detailed historical painting of the same medieval fireplace from night to morning in 1215 showing glowing embers. Warm light, wooden benches, and the great hall slowly waking. Symbolic transition between darkness and daylight. A realistic medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle household beginning another day. Workers carrying supplies. Cooks preparing food. Guards changing shifts. Snow melting outside. Early 13th century European daily life. A cinematic medieval painting of morning light entering a 1215 castle great hall, replacing candlelight from the night before, highlighting stone walls, wooden beams, and peaceful human activity. Authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval illustration of ordinary medieval objects that reveal human history in 1215 wooden tables, fireplace tools, blankets, pottery, candles, and household items showing the lives of people who used them. Realistic historical painting style. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a person leaving a snowy 1215 castle courtyard. Looking back at ancient towers covered in snow, warm windows glowing behind them, carrying memories of the winter night. Early 13th century European setting. A realistic historical painting of a 1215 castle slowly disappearing into memory and imagination. Snow-covered towers fading into mist. Echoes of firelight and stories remaining. Symbolic medieval farewell scene. Cinematic oil painting style. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle after a peaceful winter night. Morning sunlight over snowy walls. People continuing daily life. Warm fireplaces. Quiet memories of stories and companionship. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages historical artwork. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle at the moment of farewell. A traveller walking through familiar stone corridors one final time. Wooden doors, ancient walls, and quiet corners filled with memories. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a person exploring a 1215 castle for the last time, touching rough stone walls, old wooden doors, and worn surfaces showing centuries of human use. Peaceful morning light entering the corridors. Early 13th century European setting. A realistic historical oil painting of a medieval castle transformed from a fortress into a home in 1215, the Great Hall. Fireplace, sleeping chambers, and working areas filled with signs of everyday life. Authentic High Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval painting showing the evolution of a 1215 castle across generations. Different stone additions, repaired walls, expanded towers, builders and craftsmen maintaining the fortress. Early 13th century European architecture. Realistic artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of the Great Hall in a 1215 castle during morning. Fireplace burning brightly, servants preparing the room, people moving with familiar routines, while memories of nighttime stories remain. Authentic Middle Ages style. A cinematic historical painting showing the contrast between a castle as a symbol of power and a lived home in 1215. Massive defensive walls outside and warm human activity inside. Nobles, servants, and families sharing the space. A realistic medieval oil painting of a medieval person holding a meaningful household object in a 1215 castle. An old tool, piece of clothing, or personal item carrying memories. Warm candlelight. Early 13th century European emotional scene. A detailed medieval painting of the entrance of a 1215 castle in the morning. Heavy wooden doors open. Sunlight entering across the stone floor. A traveller preparing to leave after a snowy night. Authentic early 13th century atmosphere. A historical medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle showing different perspectives of medieval life. Nobles inside private chambers, workers in practical spaces, guards protecting walls, illustrating both security and social differences. Realistic High Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval painting of a person looking back through a castle corridor in 1215, seeing sleeping chambers, private rooms, and hidden working areas, each place representing a different human story. Early 13th century European style. A realistic medieval oil painting of a snow-covered 1215 castle after the storm has passed. Bright morning sky, visible forests, fields, and paths surrounding the fortress. Ancient towers standing peacefully in winter. Historical landscape artwork. A detailed medieval painting showing how a 1215 castle adapted to nature. Thick stone walls protecting from cold. Fireplaces providing warmth. Storage rooms preserving supplies. People maintaining the fortress. Authentic early 13th century engineering. A peaceful historical oil painting of a living 1215 castle continuing after a visitor leaves. Cooks preparing meals, messengers arriving, workers repairing structures, families gathering, showing the endless cycle of medieval life. A cinematic medieval painting of a traveller walking away from a 1215 castle through fresh snow, footprints behind them, ancient towers rising in the background, morning sunlight reflecting on snowy walls, emotional farewell scene, realistic oil painting style, a detailed medieval oil painting of a person leaving a castle and reflecting on the lives of medieval inhabitants, imagining guards, servants, nobles, and families continuing their routines inside. Early 13th century European Middle Ages atmosphere. A realistic historical painting of ordinary medieval life shaping history in 1215, people eating, sleeping, working, repairing tools, and sharing stories inside a castle, showing daily routines beyond famous events. Detailed High Middle Ages artwork. A cinematic medieval illustration of a 1215 castle from the outside. Towers rising above snowy fields. Windows reflecting morning light, stone walls steady against the winter sky, peaceful European medieval landscape, oil painting texture, a detailed medieval bedtime story painting of memories from a snowy night in a 1215 castle, fireplace glow, storytelling around the hearth, snowfall outside, guards walking, servants working, all blended into one nostalgic historical scene. A realistic, medieval oil painting of a castle fading into imagination and memory. Snowy fortress becoming softer in the distance. Warm lights glowing from windows. Peaceful winter landscape. Symbolic connection between past and present. An atmospheric medieval farewell painting of a 1215 European castle beneath the winter sky. A traveller walking along a snowy path while looking back at ancient towers. The fortress waiting for future generations to discover its stories. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages oil painting style. A detailed medieval oil painting of a 1215 European castle at the edge of a snowy path. A traveller standing in the foreground looking back at ancient stone towers beneath a pale winter sky. Morning light illuminating the fortress walls. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. Realistic historical painting style. A cinematic medieval painting of a traveller leaving a 1215 castle behind, walking along a snow-covered path while the fortress becomes smaller in the distance. Footprints in fresh snow. Peaceful winter landscape. Early 13th century European historical artwork. A realistic medieval oil painting of a familiar medieval castle after a winter night. Glowing windows, snow-covered towers, warm firelight visible inside, showing a fortress transformed from a distant monument into a place filled with human memories. Authentic High Middle Ages style. A detailed historical painting of a 1215 castle community. Servants, guards, storytellers, families, and craftsmen shown together inside and around the fortress, demonstrating how people created life within ancient stone walls. Early 13th century European Middle Ages artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of daily cooperation inside a 1215 castle. Workers preparing food, repairing structures, caring for animals, and organising household tasks, showing community and survival in the High Middle Ages. A realistic medieval painting of a storyteller, servant, guard, and family members from a 1215 castle night, each representing different roles in medieval life. Warm fireplace background, authentic early 13th century clothing and atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting of medieval memories preserved through objects in 1215, a carved wooden item. Old family keepsakes, musical instruments, and handmade tools displayed inside a castle chamber, showing traditions passed through generations. A cinematic medieval painting of a traveller walking through falling snow away from a 1215 castle, hearing imagined sounds of the great hall fire and distant footsteps, ancient fortress behind them, emotional farewell scene, realistic historical style. A realistic historical oil painting of a 1215 castle viewed from snowy fields, showing why castles inspire imagination. Powerful stone towers, mysterious atmosphere, but warm glowing windows revealing ordinary human life inside. A detailed medieval painting of a castle many years into the future. Ancient stone walls weathered by seasons. New generations walking through old halls. Snow falling and melting over time, showing the endurance of medieval places. A realistic medieval oil painting of a 1215 castle connected to surrounding communities, nearby farms, craftsmen, merchants, travellers, and roads leading toward the fortress, showing the wider medieval world beyond the walls. A cinematic medieval painting of medieval roads covered with snow in 1215 messengers and merchants travelling toward a distant castle. Frozen fields and villages surrounding the fortress. Authentic early 13th century European landscape. A detailed historical oil painting of a 1215 medieval castle during a peaceful winter evening. People preparing meals, sharing stories, caring for family, and resting beside fires, showing ordinary moments rather than famous events. A realistic medieval painting of ordinary medieval people in 1215 living their daily lives without knowing they would become part of history. Servants working, families gathering, craftsmen creating objects, authentic high Middle Ages atmosphere. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a traveller walking alone through a snowy landscape after leaving a 1215 castle. Gentle snowfall around them, distant towers fading behind mist. Warm memories of the fortress, emotional historical artwork. A cinematic medieval bedtime painting of a distant 1215 castle surrounded by snow. Small golden lights glowing from windows. Fireplace warmth inside. Peaceful inhabitants resting safely beneath ancient stone walls. Early 13th century Middle Ages atmosphere. A detailed medieval oil painting of the final quiet moments inside a 1215 castle at night. Crackling fireplace. Candles glowing softly. Sleeping inhabitants. Snow falling outside. Peaceful winter fortress atmosphere. Realistic historical style. A calming medieval painting of a great hall fireplace in a 1215 castle. Wooden logs burning gently. Empty benches after storytelling. Warm golden glow. Quiet stone walls holding memories of generations. Early 13th century European artwork. A peaceful medieval oil painting of a snowy castle fading into imagination. Ancient towers disappearing into winter mist. Soft candlelight and fire glow remaining. Symbolic ending of a historical bedtime journey. Cinematic Middle Ages style. An atmospheric medieval bedtime story painting of a 1215 European castle beneath a snowy night sky. Ancient stone fortress watching over quiet fields. Warm windows glowing. Gentle snowfall. Peaceful sleep atmosphere. Authentic early 13th century Middle Ages oil painting style.